Round two. Still awake, still alive, still doing this. This time, it's going to be Mark Belling, which is conservative, so.
The Mark Belling Podcast is presented by Uline. For quality shipping and industrial supplies, Uline has everything in stock. Visit uline.com. The Mark Belling Podcast is a production of iHeartRadio Podcasts.
Over the many years that I've been doing a show here, I have tried to stress to my audience the incredible power and importance of the courts. And as I've said over these many years, despite all of my preaching, I still think about half the audience doesn't get it. The other half does. But about half the audience doesn't get it. The most important power of the president, I believe, is appointing Supreme Court justices. In the state of Wisconsin, the Supreme is at least as powerful as the governor, perhaps more. And both are more powerful than the legislature. And then just go down to the fabric of our communities in terms of how all sorts of cases are handled. And proving this almost
Okay, let's keep doing Turing tests, because this was very
podcast
interesting from the last
in
one.
one way or another addresses something from the courts. We're going to start with the United States Supreme Court. You know, when they end a term, and the term ended at the end of the month, it just almost always seems like the biggest rulings come out on the last day, and they slam them up, bam, 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 bam. You know, there was the one ruling, the Dobbs ruling, that was leaked, probably by the liberals. But other than that, none of this stuff leaked out. And the big ones, the ones that were most controversial, came at the end. And certainly one of the most
Okay, so let's see
controversial is
something real
birthright
quick.
citizenship.
I tested the stealth
This
before.
went the way of the left.
Let's do it again, but this time
As you know, the Supreme
let's
Court is a 6-3
turn on the
conservative
auto
majority, but
heal.
two of those six.
I
One
probably
over to
will
the
die
left
if I
quite a
try this,
bit.
but
I think
I
it's
wanna
accurate
try
to say
it
that they stay
anyways.
on the right more than half the time. But they do wander over quite a bit. John Roberts, the Chief Justice,
nope, still doesn't
and
attack
Amy
me.
Coney Barrett, the other. And they went over to the other side of this. The question
Okay.
here is, were they right to do so? Now, one of the things that conservatives have argued forever is that courts should interpret the Constitution as it is written, not as they want it to be. The job of the courts isn't to do the right thing. The job of the courts is to determine what the law says and apply it accordingly. It's the job of legislatures, or in this case the Congress and the President, to make the laws. The courts are to interpret the laws on
Oh
the
my
basis
God,
of what they say.
okay.
That's what we've been saying all along. So on this birthright citizenship thing, I'm struggling. In terms of policy, the court got it wrong. But in terms of the law, maybe they got it right. We'll wade into this in just a moment here. Have you ever been offered an add-on option for premium or white glove service? Uline provides only one type of service, the best. From knowledgeable customer service available 24/7, 365, to keeping every product in stock, ready to ship the same day.
Sure.
When your business needs quality shipping supplies, reliable warehouse equipment, or office furniture fast,
Okay, let's keep
contact
doing this.
Uline and get the best service. Because
I'm just
Uline
gonna
believes
sit
service is
for a
essential.
while. I want to see how my
Yeah.
endurance picks up or
I'm
doesn't
going to
pick up.
read the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which is the constitutional language upon which this whole battle over birthright citizenship falls. Section 1 is the one that's applicable. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges of immunities of
Okay, so
citizens
it's
of the United
really,
States, nor shall
really
any state
close
deprive any
to
person of life, liberty,
zero
or property
gain.
without due process of
Very,
law,
very
nor
close to
deny
zero
any
gain.
person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That first line, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And the argument has been, and in fact public policy has been, therefore, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. President Trump issued an executive order saying, no, that's not true. So the case was challenged and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that that language that I just read means if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. Now, I believe the best way to interpret the meaning of language
This is like
is to try to determine what the intention was of the people who wrote the language. You know, as we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the birthday and the anniversary of the United States, I pointed out again and again the incredible brilliance of the founders of this country, who, not in 1776, but in 1789 through 91, drafted our Constitution, and were so forward-thinking, I think divinely inspired, that they were able to write a document that applied to so many things that didn't exist when they were alive.
Man, this is a
And
risk.
the majority of the language that they drafted stands today and is applicable. Their language on freedom of speech, the right to own and possess firearms.
They're not attacking me,
further
that's
down
for
the
sure.
line. Somehow they managed to envision a world far different than the one that they were in. But, I love the word but this language was not drafted by the founders. This is the 14th Amendment. The first 10 were the Bill of Rights. Anything after 10 came later. The 14th Amendment was drafted in the Civil War era. It was drafted for the purpose of making it clear that people who are born anywhere in the United States, including the slave South, were citizens and had the full right of citizenship. This amendment was to essentially declare that the Southern belief that slaves were not citizens and were not persons was wrong, and they enshrined it in the Constitution. That's why they use the language, all persons born. Slave born in the United States, that slave's a citizen. African American person or black person or colored person or whatever term they would have applied at the time, is born here, is a citizen here. That was what the purpose was. Unlike the founders, I don't know that they thought through the implications of all of this. When this language was drafted, the only way to get into the United States from the other hemisphere was by boat. Obviously, you could travel by horse from South America and from North America and so on, but the only way to get to the United States otherwise
The
was to
endurance is
come
kind
in
of a
by
problem
horse
now. Kind of a problem.
from our country and by boat from Europe. And all of the migrants who came to the United States came by boat, and it was rather easy to travel them. And those boat rides took a long time. There weren't any motors on those boats. It's not like a cruise ship that paddles along at 23 miles an hour. These boats took a long time to get over here. So, the notion that somebody would be born in the United States of an illegal immigrant probably never dawned on them in the writing of this. Nonetheless, it is what they wrote. My presumption is that they were so determined to enshrine that black people, Negro people to use the term of the time, were citizens that you're born here, you're a citizen here. And this has resulted in this dilemma that we've had for the 160 years since, where we have individuals who come to the United States illegally, make a baby, and that baby's now a citizen. Or somebody who is a citizen of France, or Uganda, or Japan, or China, who is pregnant and has a baby while here, that baby is a citizen of the United States. Trump challenged this by drafting an executive order saying no, that's not the case. The Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment does indeed mean that birthright citizenship is a real thing. Practically speaking, this has created the crisis that we have now, where we have millions of illegal immigrants, tens of thousands of whom, after coming here illegally, get pregnant and have a child, and the child's now an American citizen. So when you try to deport the parents who are illegal, the lefties are going crazy. They're deporting these children. The children are citizens. Well, they are citizens. And the Supreme Court just said they're citizens. But as our government keeps pointing out, we're not deporting the children. If the parents want to leave the children here with somebody else, they can. But since the children are obviously in the custody of the parents, if the parents leave, the children will go with them. No different than if the parents chose willingly to leave the United States, the
Stealth
children will go with
was
them.
a very good option for that. Although I don't need
But it also
infiltration.
creates implications.
I
for
guess
the
I'll
future.
do grant
There's
invisibility.
already this
They'll make
dual
it better for some
citizenship
people, I
Chinese
guess,
thing
I group
going
up
on.
with. This is a really good build.
It's becoming a real thing.
I would be
Pregnant
beneficial
Chinese women
by myself
come
and
to
with
the
other
United
people.
States while pregnant and have their babies here. Those babies are now American citizens, then they haul them back to China. They may sit in China for the rest of their lives, but they are American citizens and have a right to vote because they're American citizens.
Archeons are using
Again, none of this was envisioned when the 14th Amendment was drafted. Nonetheless, I can't deny that this seems to say if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. I have Jason here, he's a talk show host. Have you commented on this on your show? What has been your take?
I read exactly what you read, Mark, and I tend to agree with what you're saying as far as the way it's written. But then I also look at the fact that why weren't American Indian citizens? How did that not? It's like they have made exceptions before, and then I look at the Second Amendment too, and I say, well, we don't want the Second Amendment eliminated, but we can't own a machine gun. They said they were fired at a crowded theater.
That's correct. Okay, so that's his take on this. And this is the problem that comes in here. I have argued forever that with regard to the Constitution and court rulings, we have to look at two things. A, what it says, and B, what the intent was when they said it. Also, you do have situations where the language seems to come in conflict with one another, and then you resolve it. And as Jason was pointing out, we haven't established any right as being an absolute. Well, the language of the Constitution gives all citizens the right to own and possess firearms. We have restricted, and the courts have upheld, that certain citizens have forfeited some of their rights, like, for example, felons.
Let me see something real quick. Yeah, it doesn't even detect me.
So we now have all sorts of problems because of this. Now, here's the thing.
It's
If we
basically
were a
high
society
for,
that was sane, and we're not
stuff.
because half the country has gone loony, you would simply resolve the problems that exist now by changing the Constitution. In fact, the 14th Amendment itself, which I read here, was a change to the Constitution. We could simply amend the Constitution to clarify this. But I don't see any, in order to change the Constitution, you need to pass this to both houses of the Congress, and then it has to be ratified by 38 states, by 3/4 the states. How the hell are you going to get California to ratify this? Then you'd never get there. Now, reactions to this ruling. I'm going to quote from Fox News on Justice Clarence Thomas's dissent. Thomas and Alito are besides themselves here. They felt that this language was being interpreted wrongly all along. They agreed with Trump, and they wanted to take this as an opportunity to clarify what this language actually means. I'll quote from the report. Thomas accuses the majority of repurposing the 14th Amendment to protect its own set of preferred rights that the Reconstruction Congress never contemplated and that cannot find support in its text. In other words, what Thomas is saying, the Reconstruction Congress, is that's the Congress of the United States was running the country after the Civil War, where the South was back in and so on. And they were drafting these laws now to conform to the will of the Union, which won the Civil War. And Thomas points out there is nothing in any historical reference in here that there was ever any intent to have this apply to children that were dragged into the United States temporarily, or rather mothers that popped their kid while in the United States temporarily and somehow make them a citizen. So that's Thomas's argument. He continues, I am not sure that today's opinion will stand the test of time. He added that the citizenship clause, quote, added greatly to the dignity and glory of American citizenship. Today's opinion devalues that citizenship. So he's saying citizenship is being devalued. If the only requirement to be an American is to be fortunate enough at the day that you popped out of your mother for her to have been standing somewhere in the United States of America. Justice Samuel Alito from his dissent. In my judgment, the court has made a mistake that will seriously affect the country's future. Suppose that a person's only connection to the country is that he was born here to a mother who was present just long enough to give birth and then quickly returned to her native country. Suppose that country is a strategic adversary or enemy of the United States. He's clearly referencing China. Suppose the child never visited the United States while grown and was inculcated with hatred of this country. According to this court, that person is a citizen of the United States. He can enter and leave the country as he pleases. He can travel the world on a United States passport. Even if he plots to harm this country, he cannot be deprived of his status as a citizen, at least under current precedent. Further from Alito. This is one of the most important decisions in the history of the court.
Damn
And
it.
in my judgment, the court has made a serious
No.
mistake.
No, you're not going to. No.
The court's interpretation is
Oh
not
my
only
God.
contrary to the
Oh my
original
God.
meaning of the 14th Amendment,
Run.
it produces
Okay.
grotesque results. The point that Alito is referring here is, to determine what those words mean, you have to determine what the authors of the words meant. And he's arguing they did not mean this. That at some point common sense has to apply.
Man, this is nuts.
Now, one of the things that lefties like to do,
I need a group.
whenever we in the United States
I need a
decide to
fucking.
go
I
our
don't.
way on
This
something
is like.
refusing to adopt the metric system, or until 2 weeks
I need a
ago not
group.
paying any attention to soccer,
I need a group.
or socialized medicine, say, but everybody else in the
getting
world
out
does
of
it.
here.
Europe does it. Europe does it. Europe does it. Here's the
Get
thing.
out of here.
Nobody else does this.
Hell, shit. I'm gonna die. Alright, I'm dead.
The heat wave's still going on in
Just kill me.
France that they've all been whining about over there.
Run, run, run.
Stunned
again. Run,
She's pregnant.
run.
She's over there on
All
France
right, I'm
vacation,
dead.
and the heat gets to her, and she delivers a little bit early. That kid isn't going to be French. I guarantee you with that. They don't want
You know
anything
what?
that's American
I would
kid
rather make
over
it
there.
easier.
Nobody
for
does
me.
it that way.
Make it easier.
And we did it that way because
I'm
there
going
was
to
an attempt,
actually.
probably without thoroughly thinking things through,
To
to draft language to make it clear that slaves were citizens of the, well, slavery was ended, that black people were citizens of the United States
Okay.
simply by
Where are
virtue
you?
of having been born here.
Set difficulty.
which by all rights, obviously they are.
Just natural.
Their parents were both here when the mother gave birth to the child, and the child has spent his life here. So of course that child is a citizen, and any attempt to deny them citizenship on the basis of race,
There we go.
which had been attempted in the Confederate States in the South, was wrong.
That was nuts.
The hang-up I have with criticizing the decision is
Maybe
The language
times
to
2,
me-
but not times 3.
doesn't have any caveats because
That was
the
nuts.
drafters here, the Reconstruction Congress, didn't think about the total impact of what they were saying, and they didn't think about it because the notion then that we would have tens of thousands of people illegally in the United States giving birth, and those kids, those children of non-citizens, people who weren't here legally, they could not have imagined that the country would have ever had that, because this, at the time, of course, the country enforced its borders. We were a nation that was seeing immigration right and left, but it was all orderly. Everybody came in properly. The 1800s was the time of great migration from all of Europe to the United States. And they all came in. And it was all handled accordingly. The founders of that nation could not have imagined, fast forward, you would have gone through presidencies, particularly the last one, where they decided to let 20 million people in illegally and let people pop babies right and left. This Chinese pregnancy tourism thing, this is a real threat. It's something that's going on. Being a citizen means you have a right to vote.
Playing from Ethan's Pixel.
We are going to be having, never mind, there's two groups of people there. There's the people that are born in the United States, born of illegals, who are going to live therefore in the United States for the rest of their lives, and they're now green-lit in because they're citizens. At least they live here. What about the people
Okay.
who never live here other than maybe the first 2 weeks of their life after birth? They're going to be able to decide the future of our country because we
It's
arbitrarily
probably gonna be
decided
pretty
that a
easy,
tourist here
but
in the
at
United
least I
States who
won't
gives
die.
birth, that gives birth to a citizen. So they end up holding dual citizenship, Chinese and American. Obviously, this has happened in the past from time to time, where someone is here in the United States. In fact, there's been discussion of the rotten Canadian healthcare system. Some Canadian women have come to the United States to give birth in American hospitals and so on. They're citizens. It's a mess. And as I say, Trump is downplaying this, saying, well, we'll just pass legislation. Now let's imagine they try to address this via legislation while the Republicans still control the House and the Senate, but not pass a constitutional amendment. Remember, what the court struck down here was Trump's executive order. An executive order is something that a president signs that has the force of law if there is no law on the books that addresses the issue. President can't sign an executive order defying an existing law. But if there's no law that says anything one way or another on something, then the executive order stands. Trump's suggesting pass a law and that will have greater weight. I don't think it would. I think that the Supreme Court here said that the 14th Amendment means that this thing here, and that you'd have to change the Constitution, and I don't have any optimism at all that you could ever get 38 states to agree to rewrite this. Particularly given the fact that the Democrats think that the overwhelming majority of these people who are born in the United States are going to vote for Democrats.
Oh, Mikey. Okay.
There are a lot of
They're
religious
ranged
people
at like
in the Supreme
33
Court.
feet, so this should not be a
I
problem.
can't cover all of them. I do want to highlight one component, one of the other cases. Earlier in the week, the Supreme Court upheld the rights of the states to ban males from female sporting activities.
They wouldn't even attack the bots.
Justice Thomas
Yeah,
issued
this is
a
pretty
concurring opinion. Concurring opinion means he agrees with the majority, but he wanted to add in his thoughts. This thing is, if a Supreme Court concurrence can go viral, it has gone viral. Because in a very, very short concurrence, Clarence Thomas, I think, slammed down and refuted the whole gender movement. This notion that you can choose your own sex. I'm going to read his concurrence, and I'll take out the paragraph stump where he cites precedent. The court correctly holds that neither Title IX nor the Equal Protection Clause prohibit states from offering sex-separated athletics. A man does not have a legal right to compete against women just because he believes that he is a woman. I join the court's opinion in full. I write separately to make two. First, transgender status is not a suspect class requiring heightened equal protection scrutiny. Let me interject. Those are classes of people that are granted specifically enumerated rights, which we have certainly done on the basis of skin color. Some believe that we should do on the basis of any number of other protected classes. We have an Americans with Disabilities Act that protects. What he's saying here is that gender status is not a suspect class requiring heightened equal protection scrutiny. He continues. The class of people who claim transgender status could more accurately be described as people who are experiencing gender dysphoria, which is not a discrete group.
I am survived, yep.
Because gender dysphoria is a mutable mental state that is the object of psychiatric treatment. It does not resemble the immutable characteristics on the basis of which our precedents have applied heightened scrutiny: race, sex, or national origin. In other words, he's saying those groups, race, sex, or national origin, we have applied specific protections. Instead, gender dysphoria resembles other characteristics on the basis of which legislation may classify with a merely rational basis. Legislatures have many obvious rational bases to keep men who believe that they are women out of teams and private spaces reserved for women. Second, as the court recognizes, this case concerns biological men and boys who identify as girls. Men and boys with gender dysphoria are not women or girls, even if they believe they are. Sex is an immutable biological characteristic. It is binary, and man and woman, boy and girl are the terms that correspond to adults and children of each sex.
First, have some to eat right now.
To use language to obscure reality, to show indifference regarding the truth,
I need to go to a group.
is to lie to the public and cease to treat our
I
fellow
would be so
citizens
useful in a group.
as equals.
Especially when I get grand invincibility.
Well, that's pretty good, right? There's another thing going on with the courts right now. There's been so much from the courts. I don't want this one to get lost in the shuffle. Let's go back to the biggest scandal in the history of the Supreme Court, when a court decision was leaked before it came out. It never happened before. That was the Dobbs decision. That was the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. It was leaked, presumably for political advantage, to create outrage over the decision before it ever came out. Outrage to the women who believed that there was a legal right to have an abortion. This week, very briefly, NPR posted a story that Justice Alito is considering retirement. They quickly took the story down. In the story, it read, quote, "The justice that overturned Roe versus Wade." Then, the pre-written article is retracted, and Alito is nowhere.
Are those boxes?
Here's the question.
The boxes are
Somebody
the
tipped NPR off to the notion that Alito was going to resign, and they tipped them off inaccurately.
Yep. Okay. Jump. I don't think I've been attacked once since I've had stealth in this mission.
That Alito, in doing this, was trying to out the person who leaked the Dobbs ruling. That he may have implied to that person that he was going to quit,
If I went to
to
a
see if
good
they
enough
would leak it.
group, I probably could get
which
to
would be a
50
way of
tonight.
exposing who it was that
If I
leaked Dobbs.
if I tried hard enough, or if other people tried hard enough for me.
The reason this is brought up is that it is known that Supreme Court Justice Sonia
How many people are
Sotomayor
here right now?
has been very close with NPR's Nina Totenberg forever. Nina Totenberg has been with NPR before there was an NPR. She's been their courts reporter forever and ever and ever.
32, huh? Only 32 people?
There is
They're all Michigan.
speculation that Alito was so furious over this ruling on birthright citizenship that he set up Sonia Sotomayor to issue another leak as his way of beginning the process of outing who it was that leaked the Dobbs ruling, which of course would be a felony. James Woods, the great actor. I say great, he is a very good actor, but I say the great actor because of all the if you combine status and outspoken conservatism, he would be the one that would have the combination of both. In other words, there are some actors that may be extremely conservative, but not quite as famous as Woods. And there are others maybe more famous than Woods, but they're only moderately conservative. I think when you combine the two, Woods would be the one. He posted on X, I think, a very good analysis of the problem here, and it merges with mine. The problem here is that we don't have a Congress that can pass good laws and amend the Constitution when necessary. Quote, this is from James Woods. The hysteria over the unsurprising recent decisions of the Roberts Court, Justice John Roberts, shines a light on the real problem facing America. Of the three branches of government, we currently have an activist judiciary, a powerful executive, but a flat tire when it comes to the legislative branch. Birthright citizenship, for example, was not expected to be overturned by the Supreme Court. Let me interject. I didn't expect it to be overturned. I thought the ruling would go the way it would. I think Trump got advice here from his advisors that the court would indeed side with him. And I think that Trump got bad advice on this and thinking that the two so-called conservatives who lean over to the left would go and ignore what seemed to be the plainly written language of the court. Anyway, back to the analysis of James Woods. I'll repeat his sentence that led me to make
Wow,
that.
one.
Birthright citizenship, for example, was not expected to be overturned by the Supreme Court. Congress could easily establish common sense legislation that would define more clearly the original purpose and boundaries intended by the 14th
I just want to
Amendment.
see something real
That
quick.
would, however, require John Thune
I'm not changing anything. I just want to
to
see.
act like an American statesman rather than a rhino hack. So there is, as usual,
I
no
want to see.
as long as the pansy-ass Republicans mince around the halls of Congress, we are doomed. All right. Now this story. This needs to be commented on. For those of you who haven't been following closely, you may recall that Marty Brooks was fired as the head of the Milwaukee Convention Center. I won't go into all of that, but they don't have to search, obviously, for a new guy to run this big convention center. So in the interim, they're naming an interim director. This is often done. University of Wisconsin Athletic Department is an interim director. By the way, they seem to have a candidate in line, if they can cut the deal, to take over as full-time athletic director. He's the number 2 guy at Texas, was the former AD at Miami and Nebraska. Seems very and Wisconsin native. Seems very qualified, but they're gonna have to pony up the money and so on to get him to do it. Anyway, but whenever somebody leaves, there's an interim. Often the interim is the person who was like the number 2. For instance, if the police chief resigns, before they name a new one, the assistant chief or one of the assistant chiefs would generally take over on an interim basis. This is not what's happening, though, at the Convention Center District. Do you know who the Convention Center District is naming as the interim head of the Convention Center? The chairman of the district! Did he name himself? The board of directors of the Convention Center named the chairman of the board to be the interim director of the Convention Center, and he's getting paid. He's required to work 30 hours a week. He's got all these board members. They have jobs. They have lives. Now, I'll admit, the guy's name is Jim Cantor. You may not remember this, but I've met him. He runs one of these craft brewery type companies. Obviously, since he's in charge of that company, that's a job in which he can control his hours there and control his hours here. So the deal is that he's going to work 30 hours a week running the convention center and will be paid $30,000 a month to do so. Ooh, that's a good gig. Annualized, that's $360,000 a year for a 30-week job. That's a lot to give an interim. So, how did the board decide that the chairman of the board was the right guy to get this thing? Did he volunteer and say, I want it? That would seem to me to be a conflict of interest to hire yourself. Now again, I think Cantor might be the exact right guy. If you're firing Marty Brooks, it may not be the greatest statement of confidence in Marty Brooks' staff. Furthermore, Cantor's been the chairman of the board. He's been in business. He worked for Molson Coors, or whatever we call Miller Brewing. Before that, he was involved in businesses in Milwaukee in the alcohol and
Do I
tavern
really
business.
need Sprite?
And now he runs a company. He's clearly
Uh-huh.
qualified. And he may be the best guy for the job, but this story certainly demands at least some scrutiny, and I would think at the very least, they have to, if they're going to give him this gig, they better move quickly to hire the replacement. Often these things take 14 months. The first thing you do is you hire a search firm. I actually know people that are in that business, the headhunter business. You ever have a headhunter try to hunt you for anything? I had it one time. I always said, I'm not leaving any. I'm not leaving. I've never particularly understood why you need to give like $200,000 to these headhunters for jobs that all sorts of, part of it is, it's their job to find somebody who's not just going to apply, that you're going to go and approach them on the sly so that they don't have to screw up their current job by putting in an application. That's why you use that. I love it though when they hire a headhunting firm and they end up hiring the person that was on the staff all along. Well, why do you need to, anyway. Now this story. If you want an example of why cities in America are going to hell, this is a perfect example of it. Milwaukee has not gone to hell as badly as some other cities. But some things are ominous. Let me go and back up a bit. Historically, one of the things that has harmed cities, and we'll just use Milwaukee as the proxy, as the example. For the first half of the 1900s, really until about 1960 and 1970, the city of Milwaukee was the employment backbone of southeastern Wisconsin. It was not only where all the offices and the corporate headquarters for companies were, there were lots of factories, blue-collar jobs all over the city. A.O. Smith is still a company, but they're a very different company, a giant manufacturer.
That was easy.
The breweries were much bigger, and we had 3 of them. Alice Chalmers. You can go through the list of big factory-type, blue-collar type companies that employed thousands and thousands of people in Milwaukee. For lots of reasons that changed. A lot of those types of jobs didn't just leave cities. They left the country. The downsizing of Master Lock, Harley Davidson, there's just a million examples. And this has been pointed out by people on the left as to why the cities have had these terrible problems. Corporate America pulled out. Well, they could have pulled out of the whole country, including the cities, but in many cases, a lot of these types of businesses did relocate to the suburbs for other reasons, including the fact that the cost of doing business in a city is very, very high, and then the crime problem. But that point has been made that that the city of Milwaukee and other big cities will never thrive until we come back and get an employment base in the city, and there's truth to that. The greatest strength of Milwaukee lately has been the incredible housing renaissance downtown and in the Third Ward, which I thought for 40 years was overbuilt. even though I'm one of the people that is living in part of it, and it's finally now showing signs of being overbuilt. In addition to that, Northwestern Mutual and a couple of other people really expanding their foothold in downtown Milwaukee. That's been the strength. The weakness has been what's been happening in all of the neighborhoods, and not just the central city. There's been a population exodus because who the hell wants to live in a high crime area? And now the manufacturers long ago left, and now you're seeing the retailers leave. The retailers are all leaving because they can't make any money on these stores because their stuff's all being stolen right and left. So what do you do? An example of this is this big property it's called the Midtown area. It's near Capitol. It's Midtown because it's the center of the north side of Milwaukee. There was a big Walmart there, it closed. It's been empty for the longest time. Think like Northridge, except now put it right in, Northridge is kind of on the periphery of the city. This area, the Midtown Plaza area, is right in the middle of Milwaukee, and you got these empty buildings. There's like an empty department store, an empty strip mall, it's dead empty. There's a proposal. Now, the problem, and this goes back through numerous Milwaukee mayors. Norquist was afflicted with this. Barrett was afflicted with it. Every head of the Milwaukee Department of City Development, Rocky Marcoux used to run that agency, he was afflicted with it. Lafayette Crump, the current guy, open-minded on him. Maybe he's not. But they all have this notion of, this is what we want to have in Milwaukee. As I've explained any number of times, you don't get to decide! That would be like me
I'm
saying,
making Hot Pockets for dinner.
I want a private jet! How are you going to do it? I don't know.
Yeah, but
You
they're the
don't
mayors
get
of the
something in a
city,
city by
dumbass.
saying this is what we're going to have. Somebody has to want to do it. We need more housing. There are people that holding up signs here, these socialists. We need more libraries. Oh my God, we need more libraries. I don't think we need any libraries, but I've been on this thing forever. This is a very minority opinion. I do not understand the need or value of libraries in a day and age in which every single thing in the world is online. And most of the people going
That I
to the
agree with.
library are just using it to go surf on the internet for free and steal broadband.
Just
I know they have blockers on there. I've been saying forever they go in there so they can look at their child porn on their phones using the Wi-Fi in the library. It's actually not true, but I enjoy saying it anyway because they do usually have blockers on there. Anyway. Let's go back to the premise of you've got to get something to come in there, and if you can get that thing to be commercial, all the better. You relieve property tax.
I know I've
taxation
completed,
on
I don't
residential
care,
by
I wanna-
having more commercial
kill
in a
everything.
community. Secondly, if the commercial
Oh,
is
come on.
job generating, again, all the better. But you don't get to decide who it is. Somebody has to want to come in and do it. And most employers don't want to come into Milwaukee at all. Even the retailers, Walgreens is leaving. The grocery stores are leaving. So you better take what wants to come in. And the proposal had two components. One was storage outlets. It's an ideal thing for us. Obviously, a lot
Alright,
of
I
the people
think
who
I'm
live in
done
the
now.
inner
I
city
think
are
I'm
renting.
actually done.
Renting not very large places.
Is this
They
a-
often have
is
more
it
stuff than there's
Yes, you
space to
can.
put it in.
Oh, okay.
I had this, I actually even said it, back in the 90s, I said on the program, the number of things that I've said and then sat on my dumb butt and didn't do anything about. I told all my friends this is like 1996, 1997. We had this area where just when the third ward had started to redevelop and we had all these old warehouses that were empty. I said, we ought to buy a couple of these and turn them into a giant storage center. What did I do? Nothing. You would not believe the number of storage centers there. Paul is now in the storage center business. It's a great racket. Your costs, once you acquire the property, are very limited. You have some security and you build a thing in which it's really hard to break into the things, and after that you just collect the monthly checks. And there's clearly a need for it. So that'd be part of it. That isn't really job producing other than the construction that would be done, but it would create an actual use. And it would eliminate the fact that this area is being used for a lot of drug selling right now, because there would be security on presence and people that are coming in to go into their storage facilities, etc. So that's the first part. The second part is, here we go, a data center. This data center, I don't know what the smallest data center in the United States is, but this one would have been in contention. But just say those words and lefties now, their eyeballs pop out of their heads. I've been arguing forever that we cannot say no to data centers. But what we can do is do a better job of siting them. I've used the example of how there's been almost zero opposition to the largest data center maybe in the country right now, and that's the one in southern Racine County that Microsoft is building. A few people I know complaining who live nearby because there's a whirring noise that comes off, but when they were building the thing, and even now, there's almost no complaining. That obviously was an ideal site, in part because it's kind of set away from a lot of residents. There's going to be always somebody that's the closest residence to it, no matter how far. Well, that might be 3 miles or it might be 3 feet, depending on the site. I have said that Northridge would be an ideal site for a data center. The land is available. It's not immediately in a residential area. It's close enough to the freeway to get there. And it would have the infrastructure of all the utilities that the city of Milwaukee, the infrastructure of power lines and all that stuff that's already there. Well, the proposal was to put a very tiny data center at this Midtown Plaza site, the old Walmart site. The Milwaukee Plan Commission had a hearing yesterday. I'm doing this podcast on a Wednesday. They went on for 7 hours, and of course, the only people who showed up, it's all these lefties, the socialists showed up. They called themselves, this is a new name, it isn't even the DSA. Socialist and Labor or some damn thing. These people just invent a group. They call themselves. The Party for Socialism and Liberation. I mean, I almost expected Castro to be back from the dead or Che Guevara to be standing in the middle of them. They got up there and complained about it. Of course, they complained about the data centers. Now, we know what the knock of the data centers are. One of the big ones is the amount of water used, right? Do you know how much water this one would have used? 5 gallons a day! It's tiny! But that's exactly what sites like this are for. Data centers can be huge or they can be small. It would be a dedicated data center, meaning it would be serving specific clients.
I'm researching whether face shift and misdirection should be
5 gallons of water a day.
a better ability, and it's saying that misdirection's better.
But these people who are opposed to it screamed and yelled and said, don't do it. Okay? Here what you had is somebody that actually wanted to come into Milwaukee and do something that would have employed people. No. Beggars can't be choosers. So then run around and talk about the chronic high unemployment of the African American community, the problems in transportation of people who live in the central city who can't get to where all the jobs are in the suburbs, when you keep flipping off the people who actually want to come in. I actually believe, were it not for the fact that radical leftists run all of these cities, that the data centers could be put in big cities in the United States so that they're not taking up green space. You're not going to have these giant power lines in residential areas. You're putting them in areas where it's already an intense electrical grid because of businesses and factories, and there's density involved and so on, and then create a rim of protection like, say, this site, and put the data centers in there. There are areas of the south side of Chicago that are just abandoned where nobody lives at all. You could put a data center in down, they'd be perfect locations for them. They would provide economic opportunities, and they would guarantee that one of the fastest growing and most important industries in the history of man, providing data for the cloud for the entire future of AI and every other advancement in computing could occur in urban America, where there is going to be less disruption by putting them in there than if we keep trying to put them all out of the suburbs where people are against them. This is a great opportunity for some of these cities to A, bring in massive tax base improvement, and B, job opportunities, and then all of the other things that occur when you have development nearby, which creates a need for fast food restaurants and all the other things. In other words, actually create a shot in the arm, but no! So the Planning Commission, they adjourned without making a decision. This is my point about lefties. In the end, they are so damn stupid. They can't even do a no-brainer because they lack a brain. They got a bunch of communists, and don't say that that's not an appropriate. What do they call themselves? Socialist liberation. I mean, every commie word in
Democratic
there.
Socialist.
Mostly, it's Mao Zedong's language. By the way, the moment they got rid of Mao Zedong in China and got in Zhou Enlai, that's what the Chinese economy exploded when they decided, to hell with all of this Marxism stuff. We're going to be communists, but we're not Marxists. We're going to embrace capitalism. We're going to take over the world. And they've never looked back. I've got to take a break on the Mark Belling Podcast. Charisma Customs in Delafield, they're a sponsor. They're also where I took my car. They do a lot of things to make your car look really good and stand up to all
I
the
gotta
have
do
to put up
times
with
two.
on
Times
Wisconsin
one
roads.
is like, there's
The
no
package
enemies
I
at
took
all.
included ceramic
I'm
coating,
looking,
which
there's
makes
like-
the
oh, there
vehicle
we go.
look really good. Paint protection for all of the chips and stuff that comes off of our roads. The wheel package and a tint job that adds to a little bit of privacy and security. They handle all sorts of cars there, from regular old family drivers to exotic, spectacular cars. Anybody who wants to protect their car, like I do, or make it look really good, like I do, check out Charisma Customs in Delafield. They're right off the freeway. That's Charisma Customs in Delafield.
I'm curious.
This is the Mark Belling Podcast.
Oh.
I cannot allow myself to take glee in the following story. However, the story serves a purpose. Some of you know who James Causey is. He's a lefty columnist for JS Online forever. They've got other people who've taken on this role of being the African-American radical who writes columns in the paper. They've had somebody in this role forever, and Causey, and the paper's now barely a paper, it's mostly online, but Causey he writes an opinion piece. And before that, he's had other jobs there. He got into trouble when the Washington Post caught him plagiarism about a decade ago. The newspaper never to this day addressed it, and Causey never had to apologize for it. But anyway, he writes his stuff. And he's a lefty. And he's a lefty, and he comments on urban issues. You know what the whole thing is. Soft on crime, etc. Lack of our blah, 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 blah. James Causey's car was stolen. As I say, I'm not supposed to take delight in that because that's not a moral thing to do, to be gleeful about something. Somebody does something bad and it happens to somebody over in their left. I shouldn't take glee in it. I have commented on this phenomenon forever and ever and ever. There's a saying that goes back to the 60s. A conservative is a liberal who's been mugged. You know, all these lefties are all their soft on crime, bleeding heart stuff. You know, somebody gets caught, say, stealing 29 cars, and they put it back on the street all 29 times, and then they steal their car. So, of course, Causey's confronting this, and the reason we know about this is he's written a piece.
Doesn't even know I'm there. Look at that. Doesn't even know I'm there.
The headline: my car was stolen mid-afternoon from a downtown Milwaukee street. No! You don't say, James. I don't know. I didn't go back and research. I'm just guessing he's one of those people that's been writing us that people claim that the crime problem in Milwaukee is overstated. Maybe he hasn't. We're getting told this stuff. For those people like me who live in Milwaukee, at a nice part of Milwaukee, it is a huge problem. Oh, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Because broad daylight, his car is stolen downtown. Let me give you a few paragraphs. On June 23rd, something happened I hope
This
you
is
never
too
have to
easy.
endure. My car was stolen broad daylight on a highly traveled downtown street. Some people dismiss auto theft as a property crime. It isn't that simple. It's a deeply personal violation that lands like a gut punch and lingers long after the vehicle is gone. So, the fact that this is coming out of him, this is a good thing. That this lefty has been enlightened to the scourge of what happened.
Yeah, I gotta do times 2. Times 1 is way too easy.
Violate you,
And
they're not
boring.
violating you because they
Times
need a car.
3 is
Chances are
like
this car
the-
was taken to be joyridden.
Is like
Maybe it's chopped up,
it's
but the majority
not
of these cars that are stolen
impossible,
are from
but
Juneau Avenue outside MATC's downtown campus between 2:30 and 4. I went to MATC to interview Vivian King about Diner.
this is
and
gonna be
Blanc
my
for PBS
main
Black Nouveau. It was supposed to be a
mastermind.
big
This is
song.
gonna
It
be
goes
my
on and
main
on.
guy
Then he
for
points out he got back to
masterminds.
the
I have
and
other
people dreams. So
masterminds.
if you ever had this dream,
This is my main
you
guy
wake
because
up and
this
you go to where your
his
car
lore
is,
is
the car's
good
not
if
there.
you understand who
It's a
Alan
con-
Turing is
I've had
and
it maybe a couple of times.
everything
It's one
about
of
it
those
is
common
good.
dreams
I like
flying
it.
or
I
you
know
wake up
that
and
it's a
it's
meme
common
spec.
dream.
You know, robots aren't
So
that
panic
good.
gave way to certainty.
Empathy
Damn, I
isn't
muttered,
very
they got
good,
me.
but it's
Car thefts in Milwaukee have
I
fallen
like it.
sharply from their peak a few years ago, but statistics don't offer much comfort when you're the victim. So then he goes on and points out he has insurance, but my Audi wasn't valuable because it was flashy or expensive. It was valuable
This
because
is
it was
gonna be
paid off, it was reliable, it got me where I
yeah.
needed to go. And then he said, I
I
just
hate
want
caves, but they don't do anything bad for masterminds.
I'm not saying this because I have this glee that a lefty is a victim of crime. I'm bringing this up because the more times that lefties are victims of crime, the more they are open to the notion that we have got to stop rewarding people who commit crime by keeping them on the streets to commit another.
This is exactly why I do not like
An update on the
caves.
story that we've been covering on this podcast.
There's still like no enemies.
Arrowhead High School at its
You really
graduation
doubled it. Come on.
blocked apparently 6 or 7 students from using the slideshow. Students were allowed to put up a brief comment on a slideshow that was to be shown during the graduation as all the students went up to get their diplomas and so on. 6 or 7 of the students had used the slideshow to make some sort of religious statement, and one of the students has ended up talking about it. The school district administration told them that they couldn't say that. They had to say something else. And they cited a policy that said you can't take political or religious viewpoints on this. One of the students, her name, this is all background, there's new information here and it's big. Sirian Baranja graduated, went to the school board after the graduation and complained about it. This made news, and among the places that it's made news is on my podcast. I quoted on the Monday podcast the response in defense of this
Yeah, it's
censoring
hot.
of Sirian by the school district administrator Conrad Farner. And he said, we have a policy in
I have no
place,
idea where I'm going.
and the policy is not to allow this. And if we
Oh,
allow this,
there
then
you
we
go.
have to allow any manner of other kinds of
I've
political
defeated
speech
this
that
guy
we
like
wouldn't
hundreds
want.
of times, I think.
That was his
He's pretty
position.
easy to defeat, honestly.
And
Even
he
with
said,
any
we have the
character,
law on our side.
honestly.
And I said, I'm not sure that you do have the law on your side. The law clearly, the Supreme Court has held forever, that government cannot censor speech of a private individual, even if it's on government grounds.
Yeah,
Violation of the
he-
First Amendment right.
There's probably
It
more
does
enemies,
say
but I
that
don't know where
government
they'd be.
can restrict its own speech.
That's pretty overcooked.
These were student statements, but the administrator's point is, it was a presentation put on by the
Now,
district. The student submitted this to the school, and the school played it. It's not like the student was up there giving a speech. It was on a slideshow that the school was putting on. The Wisconsin Institute of, first thing, this story has now gone national, as I thought it would. We now have some conservative media outlets, and when they see some school board roll over and allow a superintendent to silence a Christian kid, there are some conservative outlets that will draw attention to this. This is being covered on Fox News. It's on their website. So we now have a national story over something that only occurred because the superintendent could have just let this happen. And my guess is maybe 3 people would have bitched that the student in question, Syrian, she quoted Proverbs 3:6. It's a rather benign.
I'd rather be in a group right
It's
now,
not
to be
even worth
honest.
the
I
Christian
really
TV
would.
test.
I would really rather be in a group right now. But nobody answered my call.
Fox News covered this, and now the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, which is a conservative legal organization based in Milwaukee and becoming probably the premier conservative civil rights organization in the United States. They have sent a letter today to Arrowhead School Board, essentially saying, we're going to sue you. You clearly violated her rights and you had no right to do it. Now we'll get into their statement in a moment. In response to this, I contacted the president of the school board and copied the other school board members, essentially saying, all right, now if you don't retract this and issue an apology to the student, you're going to be sued and you're going to lose. Furthermore, if you're sued, that means you have to hire a lawyer to defend your censorship. Are you going to do the right thing and the easy thing by just admitting that you shouldn't have done it?
Now,
The president of the school board is named Kim Schubert, and she's dug in. I'll read her response to me.
yeah, this base was
summarizing
made
it.
for like 8
No, we're not gonna back
times
down. We
8,
did the right
9
thing.
times 2.
So,
Oh, well.
go ahead and sue us. See, here's the thing. When you tell Will to go ahead and sue them, they're gonna sue you! And they win these cases right and left often. After the suit is filed, the lawyers for the individual district or governmental body say, you got a losing case here, you better settle. Here's the response I received from Kim Schubert, the school board president. Dear Mr. Belling, by the way, this just holds forever. When the person's agreeing with my position, they say, Dear Mark. When they're disagreeing, they say, Dear Mr. Belling. I'd probably leave that true. Dear Mr. Belling, over the past 5 years, the Arrowhead High School Board of Education has been intentional and proactive in developing and overseeing the implementation of strong conservative board policy. But I brought this up because the school board in Arrowhead, the majority of the members have campaigned on the basis of being conservative.
Look at
And
something.
as you know, I find that many conservative school board members then, once they get on the board, stop being conservative and instead roll over to the invariably leftist superintendent that they hire. Now, I don't know if Farner's a leftist.
Can't reduce its
I may have to
recharge
step around.
rate.
I know he came from
Oh, well.
Cedarburg, which would be an indication he is a leftist, but maybe he's not. But the conservative school boards often say that they're conservative until it comes time to actually act conservatively. Proactive in developing and overseeing the implementation of strong conservative board policies that reflect both the values of the community and the best interests of our students. Our policy work has been recognized throughout Wisconsin, with other public school districts using Arrowhead's policies as models for their own adoption. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss our policies with you and the thoughtful process behind the development. The policies adopted by our board are not merely statements on paper. They guide the day-to-day operation of our high school, including decisions surrounding our annual graduation convention ceremony. This year's graduates were provided clear, explicit guidelines regarding the personalized messaging displayed on the Jumbotron during the commencement. Unfortunately, a student's failure to follow those directions has resulted in the controversy now being discussed. I just love the fact that we told them that they can't do that. Somehow is an excuse to violate someone's rights. If you're violating someone's rights and they don't go along with their rights being violated, you're not covered because you told them you were going to violate their rights. She continues. When concerns arose regarding the denial of a Bible verse, Superintendent Farner appropriately sought legal guidance from our attorney at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. Now let me interject on this. The number of school districts in the state of Wisconsin that have gotten themselves into legal hot water by either A, asking their attorneys if you know better, or the Wisconsin Association of School Board, which has a full-time staff of Madison-based lawyers. I would suggest the next time around, you contact a good lawyer. Anyway, on the basis of the lawyer at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards that we contacted, the same attorney who assisted in drafting many of the board's conservative policies. After receiving that guidance, the district acted consistently with both the law and the board's own policies. While I believe the overwhelming majority, if not every member of our board, would personally welcome students expressing their faith during graduation, permitting one form of religious or ideological expression would require the district to permit all viewpoints.
And they should.
Maybe I'll grant you Maybe so.
And
There
it's a good
are,
thing.
of course, limits on free speech that you can make, but she's certainly right that if you allowed this, I mean, I was going to say Jewish, but this is an Old Testament statement, somebody could quote the Quran. She
So
may
what?
theoretically be correct about that.
What's wrong with that?
That would include messages praising Satan or other extremist or offensive expressions that have previously been submitted to administration.
That's your
Our
opinion,
responsibility
sir.
is to apply board policy consistently and without favoritism, regardless of the viewpoint being expressed. What
Freedom
began
of
as a
religion, man,
well-intentioned
no matter what
opportunity for
religion you are.
graduates to personalize their recognition has unfortunately created a necessary distraction. I love it. When this, whether you're on the light of the rep, whenever somebody brings up a story that you don't like, they call it a distraction. It's distracting to you. I'm not distracted by this. I'm quite interested. What about you, Jason? Are you distracted from the podcast? Or are you enjoying this particular segment? I think that this is a good segment. I'm not distracted at all. I mean, many things are distraction. Remember Morgana? 74 your time? Yeah. Morgana was this big boobed stripper who, I mean, she was clearly getting assistance. She would run onto baseball stadiums and go to the mound and kiss the pitcher.
What?
I mean, I don't remember her being arrested. I think that she cut deals with the team. Now you could say that was a distraction. Was it a bad distraction? So again, that's up to you. Let me get back to my point.
That has nothing to do with religion.
There are just certain things that, anyway.
That has nothing to do with
For the
religion.
true purpose of commencement, celebrating the accomplishments of our students. No, I would retort to that seriously.
Ah, stupid
True Christians
bots are
taught
useless.
that their faith is the center of their lives and everything else is secondary. And therefore, if she's going to make a statement upon her commencement, it almost would be imperative, if she has strong religious beliefs, that there would be a religious component to it. Furthermore, I will also indicate that her statement was close to non-denominational. It was a biblical verse, and it capitalized, it was either him or he referring to God. But it certainly was not Christian. It came from the Old Testament. Anyway. Consequently, the district will continue the original Jumbotron message beginning with future graduation ceremonies. Our board remains committed to adopting and faithfully implementing policies that are
Okay,
legally
no,
sound,
probably
reflecting
should.
the values of our community, and place the educational mission of Arrowhead. Again, I welcome the
Something
opportunity to
here
provide
that
more
needs
detail
to
on
be
our policy
flashy.
development. Now, I will point
Get
out,
the auto.
she didn't answer a single
something.
damn question that I asked. I'm doing this in reverse. This is what I sent her. Because she gave me all these things defending it. This is what I wrote. Now that the decision to ban a student from quoting a Bible verse in the graduation slideshow has produced the threat of a lawsuit from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and has received national attention on Fox News, will the school board finally address
This
this
is a big
ban?
distraction.
It is fairly clear that once a student is allowed to speak, that such speech cannot be censored, particularly if
Probably.
that speech is protected under the First Amendment. Your superintendent is
Yep,
stubbornly
there it
contending
is
with
right
this
there.
decision, evidently citing advice, and I put that in quotes, from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. The vast majority of the Arrowhead School Board ran as conservatives, yet has refused to rein in an administrator who went farther than most liberal district administrators would have gone in gagging a student's expression of her faith. Will the school board address this issue? Will it acknowledge the administration erred? Or is the district going to spend funds to go to court to defend this mishandling, knowing that it is wrong on the law and wrong on policy? I'll be commenting on this matter on my podcast today, and then I mentioned when I record, I'd appreciate a response.
nobody online,
She did,
too.
I will say, give me the response prior to that point. Well, as I said, the Wisconsin
It's rude to
Institute of
do
Law,
that,
and
to
they
just
released the letter
randomly
to me. It
message
is
people.
long. I won't read it all, but the point in it being long is, in writing the letter, this Milwaukee-based organization, Rick Eisenberg's the head of it, but they've got big staff now. They've done tremendous work. They lay out the entire legal basis for why the district is wrong in defending the objections here of this student. And as I say, the school district is wrong. Once they open the door to allow the student to speak, they can't censor the student's speech if it tends to be religious. What they can do is not allow anybody to speak. And for example, in many cases, students have used their commencement speech, their graduation speech, to say something religious. The courts have been clear on that. You can't stop them. You can stop an employee while representing the district from doing something, but you can't stop the student who's an individual unto him or herself from saying what they want to say. Here's the beginning of the letter to the school district. Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty represents Sarian Baraja
That's clever.
regarding the decision by Arrowhead Union High School District officials to prohibit her from including a Bible verse in a graduation slideshow submission on the June 6, 2026 commencement.
Bob the farmer.
In addition to representing Ms. Baraja, Will also
Yeah, I know
represents
what
her
that is.
mom, Laura Engel, who has younger children, including a daughter who will soon attend Arrowhead High School. And then they go on to point out, Will has serious concerns that the district violated Ms. Baraja's rights under the free speech clause and free exercise clause of the First Amendment by excluding her expression solely because it conveyed a religious viewpoint. The district also risks violating the First Amendment rights of future graduating students. Then it lays out the background.
Probably should go to sit after I finish.
Legal analysis. The First Amendment does not permit public schools to suppress student speech merely because it is religious. Religious speech is protected speech, and public schools may not discriminate against speech because it reflects a religious perspective. Here, the critical question is not whether Arrowhead permitted students to express themselves, it plainly did. Students were invited to submit personal messages to accompany their graduation slides, and the district approved a wide variety of personal expressions, including statements of gratitude, inspirational messages, humor, pop culture references, song lyrics, and even requests for financial support. The question is whether students were permitted to express themselves only if their message was non-religious. The answer appears to be yes. A student who thanked parents, coaches, teachers, or friends could apparently participate. A student who thanked God could not. See, I just memo to Aaron, you're going to lose this case. So get over yourself and admit you're wrong. Jim Schubert, we made a policy. Yeah, you made a policy. The South made a law that said they could have slaves. Not equating the two. But just because you did something didn't mean that it's something that you were legally allowed to do. Why don't you stop yet? All right, back to the thing. A student who shared an inspirational message from Batman could apparently participate. A student who shared an
Oh, and by the
inspirational
way,
verse in the Bible could not.
In case you're
Such
wondering,
a distinction is quintessential viewpoint discrimination. They then go on and analyze the Supreme Court's Hazelwood case, which is the operative matter here, which the superintendent relied upon. Then continue. The Constitution does not permit school districts to engage in
If you wanna
viewpoint
read that.
discrimination, and they come up with numerous precedents on this. And again, it's very long. They lay out this case, and that's why the school board president has gotten this. And the fact that she digs in her heels after reading a legal analysis from lawyers that are far more qualified than the hacks over at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. Just, you're conservative. How much money are you going to spend going to court to defend this case that you will lose? Further from Will. Ms. Baraja's personal expression on a slide was not tantamount to the district endorsing
based off a real
Christianity.
thing, too.
See, and that's the thing that the district was hanging its hand on. They're saying, if we let her say this in the slideshow, then it becomes our speech. Here's their reputation in that. To the extent the district silenced Ms. Baraja out of a hypothetical concern that her message might be perceived as the district endorsing Christianity, the rationale embraces an outdated understanding of Establishment Clause doctrine. The U.S. Supreme Court long ago abandoned the endorsement test for evaluating the Establishment Clause, and then it cites Kennedy case, 597 U.S. at 510. Comes up with the legal citations, and has since interpreted the clause by reference to historical practices and understandings, and then they come up with numerous other sites. Regardless, the policy cannot logically rely upon purported fear of religious coercion because a Bible verse displayed for a few seconds on a student's slide cannot reasonably be understood to make a religious observance compulsory. Continues, and I'll read the conclusion. Graduation marks the culmination of a student's educational journey. The Constitution does not permit a public school district to require students to conceal or abandon those religious viewpoints as the price of participation in that milestone. Too often we have seen well-meaning school officials thinking they are complying with the Establishment Clause mistakenly go too far and censor the private speech of students, violating students' First Amendment rights. Regarding Mrs. Engel, that's the mom, parents possess a well-recognized liberty interest in directing the upbringing and education of their children. Mrs. Engel understandably wishes to know whether her younger daughter will be permitted to express her faith on equal terms with her peers when she reaches graduation. And then here's their demand. And the demands are reasonable. We therefore request the district take the following action. 1. Confirm in writing that students retain the right to express religious viewpoints on the same terms as comparable non-religious viewpoints in graduation-related submissions and other student expression opportunities. 2. rescind any policy, directive, practice, or interpretation that prohibits student religious expression solely because it is religious in nature. 3. Require administrative officials for the district to undergo training in religious liberty and student speech. Oh, that's the one I love. I want to see Conrad Farter and the principals and all that on Arrowhead go in there and being told, all this stuff you believed about silencing religion, you can't do. I hope they don't back down on that demand. That's the good one. Do you know how many conservatives have been forced to go through on-the-job training on DEI and all of this other crap? 4. Issue a public apology to Ms. Baranja and her family, acknowledging that religious viewpoints are entitled to the same constitutional protections as comparable non-religious viewpoints, and committing that the future students will not be subject to similar discrimination. Our clients would prefer to resolve this matter cooperatively and without litigation. However, they are prepared to pursue all available legal remedies to defend their constitutional rights. Ms. Baranja is evaluating her legal options to address the violation of her rights, and Mrs. Engel is prepared to take appropriate action to ensure that future graduates, including her younger daughter, are not subjected to similar unconstitutional treatment. It's signed by officials of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And a bunch of brilliant legal minds over there signs the name of this.
I don't care if I'm done. I want to
expect
kill
them
more.
to take my advice, but I would advise Arrowhead. Do the hardest thing in the world. Admit you were wrong.
I'm still
And
hungry.
also understand that if you're seeking legal advice from a lefty law firm like Bulow Better or a lefty Madison-based association like the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, you're probably going to get crap advice. There was a time, and I said at the beginning of the program, so much of today's show is about the courts. One of the areas in which the courts, over the years, as it's gotten more conservative, has gotten it right, has been to reestablish that the First Amendment of the United States does ban individuals from expressing their religious viewpoints, but in fact specifically demands that they be allowed to do so. One other quick case. It also involves this organization, Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty. This has been an ongoing case. The state
Okay,
Department of
this
Public
podcast
Instruction
is almost over, and I did a pretty good job. I think I did improve the character tonight a little
The
bit.
state academic standards. In other words, a lower score would be considered passing on the standardized tests. And would be
Sound
considered
Headshot
to be
T-shirt.
proficient.
I might stream
They
that
lowered the standards,
eventually.
and went off and did this.
That's
This meeting
played
was
away.
there was a request for the records of that meeting, and the Department of Public Instruction defied it for 18 months. They defied it because they clearly didn't notice the meeting, and they didn't want to be able to have to release the records, which would show which people said what about why we have to lower the standards to make it appear as though our crappy schools aren't as crappy as they are. Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty is now demanding that they pay for this delay and is demanding compensation of $134,000. The Evers administration, and DPI is separate from it, but the Evers administration, the Josh Hall, Department of Justice, DPI, and I will grant the Republican legislature, has flipped off the state open records law and has ignored blatant violations of the open meetings law. They need to be made to pay. You're listening to the Mark Belling Podcast. How much would it take for you to be wealthy and financially comfortable? Schwab recently asked Americans that question. Most said at least $2 million. You might have a different number for yourself. Makes sense, since you have your own ideas about travel, retirement, and the legacy you want to leave. That means you need custom advice, building a personalized plan. The team at Annex Wealth Management is ready to listen and help. Annex Wealth Management. Give them a call. Know the difference. This is the Mark Belling Podcast. I'm going to use the last segment here to plug the final podcast of the week. That'll be the one. This is Wednesday. We'll be releasing it tomorrow, Thursday. It's going to be my 4th of July podcast, which, if you don't know, despite the fact that I constantly bring it up, is my birthday. It actually coincides with, of course, the 250th birthday of the United States. It is rather remarkable that on a big number anniversary like this, I think the premise of our nation is being attacked more seriously than at any point in its 250-year history. I'm pessimistic about the future of the country. And I want to address the brilliance of the Declaration and how the principles in it are simply being wholesale rejected by the Marxist radicals.
I got my water here for my
who don't believe in those rights and
medication
don't
after
believe
I'm
in
done
those
with
principles.
this.
So that'll be a big
I've been
portion
streaming
of
again
the
for
next podcast that we do.
an hour and 20 minutes. And this is almost over.
The Mark Belling Podcast is a production of iHeartRadio Podcasts. Production and engineering by Jason Gotch. The Mark Belling Podcast is presented by Uline. For quality shipping and industrial supplies, Uline has everything in stock. Visit uline.com. Listen to all of Mark's podcasts, always available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Alright, okay. There we go, pause it.